What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Tuesday, May 2nd, 2017, getting into the week here. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, his hand hovering over that telephone, ready to swoop on down and put you on the air. And getting right on into the news, obviously North Korea is still uppermost in a lot of people's minds. And McMasters is still out there rattling the sabers and threatening North Korea, and we're going to come get you. And it's not helping to settle things down. What it's underscoring is they don't want things settled down. They're trying to find some way to get a really nasty war going on which they can blame the coming economic crash. Because if the economy crashes and they don't have an enemy to blame it on, oh, it's Russia, it's China, it's North Korea, then the American people are going to say this was a mess created by the private central bank aided by a complicit United States government, and things are going to get very ugly, especially when corporate supply chains start to collapse and people start getting very, very hungry. And I'm trying to remember who it was who said that the distance between civilization and total anarchy is 7 days without food. So we're possibly looking at that. Now, getting on back to this, basically, there are some serious analysts who are coming on out. And this article over in pry.org saying, is North Korea really a threat to the United States? And they're talking about many U.S. officials and pundits are out there with the threat from North Korea, and just like they told us the threat from Iraq and the threat from Iran. But Korea experts are saying that really is ridiculous. And Frank Januzzi, who's an expert, says the likelihood of a sneak attack by North Korea, especially one with nuclear weapons, is infinitesimally small. And he's absolutely right, and it's what we have been saying all along. The whole point of a nation acquiring nuclear weapons is to deter invasion, to deter an attack. And even if Saddam Hussein had had nuclear weapons, he wouldn't have struck first. Why throw away your deterrent? That's a very bad strategic move to make. Same thing, if Iran ever gets nuclear weapons, they're not going to attack anybody. They're not going to attack the United States or Israel because the resulting retaliation would melt the entire country down into slag. And the same thing is true of North Korea. North Korea wants nuclear weapons so that they will be left alone. And we posted a graphic on the page of whatreallyhappened.com, which you might want to copy off and send around. And it is a list of all the recent U.S. interventions into countries over the last several years, and they're all commented. This country did not have nuclear weapons to deter invasion. And it gets down to the bottom of the list, and it says, now you know why the United States wants North Korea to get rid of their nuclear weapons, to make it easier to eventually invade. Meanwhile, North Korea is pushing back on the provocations by the United States, where apparently two supersonic B-1B Lancer bombers have been basically flying over the peninsula. And these are nuclear-capable bombers. And it tells you who the aggressor and the provocateur is. Because North Korea isn't flying their aircraft near our country. There are no North Korean warships off our coast. We know who the aggressor is. And unfortunately, the deep state is absolutely desperate for war. Because they think it's going to solve all the problems, that we, the American people, are going to forget all about the crimes and the corruption and all the abuse we've suffered over the last couple of decades, throw the flag, a snappy salute, and fling our money and our babies onto the designated enemy's bayonets. It's not going to happen. It's a very different public perception of war right now than it has been in the past. Because, again, we all know we were lied to about Saddam's nuclear weapons. We know we were lied to about Assad's gas, just as we were lied to about a Spanish mine in Havana Harbor and torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. Pearl Harbor was a surprise. The Lusitania wasn't smuggling weapons to Great Britain. We have been lied to so much, the prudent assumption whenever anybody in government and the corporate media opens their mouth is, oh, look, here comes another lie. And North Korea is basically saying they're going to strengthen their nuclear force to the maximum. And what that really means is the cost of invading North Korea will be far greater than any possible advantage you could get out of it. That's the whole point of having a nuclear deterrent. Lots of countries have nuclear weapons. So far, only one has actually used them on the people of another country, and that's the United States. Everybody wants to talk about disarmament. Let's start with the nation that actually has been psychotic enough to do this. Now, the THAAD missile system, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Missile, is now operational in South Korea. The people living around it are very unhappy because it makes them a high priority target in the event of a conflict breaking out with North Korea. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. China is very upset over the presence of the THAAD. They are demanding an immediate halt to the THAAD deployment in South Korea. And basically came on out and said China is ready to protect their interests. So everybody's fanning this up. They're ramping it up. Now, South Korean media is warning about Trump's mouth threatening the U.S. alliance. And this gets back to the fact that the United States has just planted THAAD in South Korea, then turned around and demanded South Korea pay for it, about $1 billion. And the government of South Korea said, you know, we didn't really want it here, and we're not going to pay for it, and you can go pound kimchi. And, of course, we're coming up in just over a week on South Korea's elections. And the leading candidate right now is saying that if he wins, if the election isn't stolen from him, if he isn't assassinated, that he wants the United States to get out of South Korea. They'll take care of their own defense, and he wants to reach his hand across the DMZ to Kim Jong-un and say, let's tone this down. Let's get back to talking about reunification. So, here we go. Now then, the other day I made a comment to the effect that the recent failed North Korean missile test may have been deliberate in order to allow Kim Jong-un to defuse the situation without having to back down and lose face. By sending a message to the world, well, none of North Korea's weapons really work all that well anyway. The United States is making a big deal out of nothing. And interestingly enough, we're getting a story out of Sputnik News where South Korea is saying that the test on Saturday wasn't a failure, that it was deliberately exploded at the top of its arc before it could leave North Korean territory. Now, they're going on to say that this was just Kim Jong-un not wanting to provoke by having the missile go down to the Sea of Japan. But it could be the other theory as well. I think the telling indicator would be North Korea is still saying they're getting ready to do their 6th nuclear test. And if that one turns out to be a fizzle, then yeah, North Korea is trying to ramp the situation down by showing the world their weapons don't really work all that well. And that leaves the United States nowhere to go. We demand you destroy your nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. And Kim Jong-un comes back and says, don't have to worry about it, they're blowing themselves up. Now, getting on over to Syria, especially the Kurdish area, apparently the Syrian Defense Forces have ISIS on the run, and now Turkey is launching unprovoked airstrikes against the Kurdish fighters. And in response, both the United States and Russia are deploying troops who are going to be fighting side by side in support of the Kurdish fighters. That situation there is dangerously confused. Up in the north, Russia and the U.S. are at each other, and over by the Kurds, they're working with each other. Very, very hard to figure out what's really going on out there. Erdogan is turning out to be the wild card in all of this. Now, an interesting story is coming out of srbin.info, and it basically is saying that the American envoy to Macedonia has been one of the authors of this recent upset, rioting, protesting, turmoil. We know that Macedonia kicked out the George Soros NGOs a while back to try and head this off. But apparently, Ambassador to Macedonia, Jess Bailey, planned to recognize the new Parliament Speaker on Thursday evening, saying, oh, we have a new government in Macedonia. Now, for those of you who follow history, the same exact thing happened here in Hawaii. When the U.S. took over Hawaii and the American envoy recognized the new provisional government, even though he did not have the plenipotentiary powers and authority to do so. And this sounds like another envoy has stepped over the line to declare a new government in Macedonia, which is not our country, not really our business. Meanwhile, over in Serbia, Serbia seems to be pivoting more toward Russia and Vladimir Putin. They're now accepting Russian weaponry and basically saying they're not all that interested in joining the European Union, which is what Ukraine was saying just before the coup d'etat. Now, here's an interesting development, despite all the hostility going on. And by the way, Donald Trump earlier today had a phone call with Vladimir Putin to try and mend U.S.-Russian relations, and apparently Putin agreed to work with Trump on a diplomatic solution for North Korea. So they may be backing off on that. Of course, all it's going to take is somebody to do a false flag, like they did in Syria. Remember, it looked like Syria was finally winding down, and they had a false flag, and oh, they went back in again. So that's always still a wild card that we have to keep an eye on. But the Senate has quietly dropped the bill they were considering for new sanctions against Russia, and is instead turning their attention to Iran and demanding new sanctions against Iran over concerns about their ballistic missile program, which was never a part of the P5+1 deal. And again, Iran wants ballistic missiles as a deterrent. Iran is not a warlike country. It has been over 200 years since Iran initiated a war of aggression against another country. And it certainly hasn't happened since the 1979 Iranian Revolution, when they kicked out the U.S. puppet ruler, the Shah. They're not the threat to peace in the Middle East. By the way, apparently a few months ago there actually was a poll that was conducted by one of the global media organizations. Who's the greatest threat to world peace? And the United States came in at number 1, and the poll was quickly buried and will never be repeated again, as far as we can tell. But they're talking about new sanctions on Iran to basically just increase the pressure on them. But Iran is not a threat. It's complied with the P5+1. It is pursuing peaceful uses of nuclear technology, which it is allowed to do because it has signed and ratified the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It has allowed all IAEA inspections. But Israel wants Iran smashed up into little tiny pieces that are easier to bully and push around. And that's a big part of what's driving this. And of course, the private central bankers are very angry with any nation that has a state central bank that manages the public currency as a public utility for the benefit of the public. Now, Hamas has issued a policy statement, and I'm not sure what they were intending to do. Basically, they've come on out with a political document saying that it accepts the formation of a Palestinian state along the 1967 borders without recognizing the statehood of Israel. And it says the conflict in Palestine is not a religious one. Now, these are now the official positions of Hamas. And I'm sorry to say this, it is a little unrealistic, because Israel's opening position on any discussion of any talk is you will recognize the statehood of Israel. And the reason that's always been a sticking point is since its creation, Israel's attitude has been, you will recognize our statehood, we don't have to recognize yours. And on that one sticking point, we have seen so much bloodshed and destruction. Now, Fatah and Hamas should have been working much closer together, but I think Israel encourages a division between Fatah and Hamas to keep the political turmoil going in Palestine and the West Bank in order to avoid peace talks by saying, we don't know who's in charge over there. We don't know who to talk to. But Israel will never accept the 1967 borders. That's why they've been building all these illegal settlements all over the West Bank. They're going to say, return to the 67 borders. It would be horrible to uproot these poor people and send them back to Israel. There is one solution. Nobody will ever go for it, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. And that is establish the state of Palestine on the 1967 borders and say the illegal settlements can stay. And the people can go on living there. And they can worship as they choose and they can live their lives. Problem solved. It's not going to happen. But that would be the ideal solution. All right, we're going to go ahead here and take a phone call from Mike in Arizona. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yesterday, you got a call. There was someone was asking about the difference between napalm and Agent Orange, and then there was also a follow-up question having to do with the use of Agent Orange in Korea.
Yes.
And I'll make a reference to the latest Veterans of Foreign War magazine. You can access it online. It's vfw.org.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the May of 2017 issue. And the commander, national commander of the VFW, had gone to Washington on March the 1st to the Joint House-Senate Committee on the VA. And it says in here to amend the Public Law 108-183, required the VA to begin a presumptive date of veterans exposed to Agent Orange along the Korean DMZ to 1 September 1967. So it kind of answers some of the questions from the caller yesterday that, yes, in fact, that Agent Orange was used in Korea, but the earliest date is most likely around 1 September 67, so it was not used, as far as I can tell right now, during the quote-unquote Korean War.
Yeah, it was used to defoliate the DMZ, but that was after the ceasefire had been settled on. And they wanted to just raise that DMZ absolutely flat, load it up with mines, and keep their visual, their lines of sight for surveillance. But it has created a problem, because if Korea reunifies, it's not like people can just walk across that land. That stuff is hideously toxic, and it lasts forever. They're literally going to have to build shielded highways and transit tubes to connect the two Koreas. Because that DMZ is going to be a no-man's zone for a very, very long time.
Now, there's a train track that's laid across. A couple of years ago, they had it open, and the trains were going back and forth. So there are alleys through there. But, yeah, that's always been a sticking point about the DMZ. I recall back, it was like in 1976 or something, that there was a big tree in the DMZ, and the U.S. had sent out some people to trim the tree back, and the North Koreans showed up and hacked them to death with axes. And then we sent in the 82nd Airborne and blew the whole tree up. So there certainly is. But it was just, trying to answer the question of somebody else had called yesterday and asking about the Korean War and DMZ and Agent Orange and everything. So that's all I have to say. Mahalo. Aloha.
Aloha. Mahalo back at you. And as I mentioned before, Agent Orange was developed in part and tested over at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And apparently there was an accident where 3 students were killed, and they tested it down on the Big Island. And where they tested it, and we're talking about, this was back in the mid-1960s, where they tested it, it's still fenced off, and you cannot go in there. The main component of it is dioxin, which is very toxic, and it just lasts forever. I don't, off the top of my head, remember how long it takes to decay, but it's a very, very long time. I know there's one area in Europe where back in the 70s, I think, they had an industrial accident that released a bunch of dioxin, and it's still toxic, permanently fenced off. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a little footnote to the issue of Israel and Palestine. Last week, we put up a couple of posters and mentioned that in New York City, Gilad Atzmon was going to be taking part in a discussion about various affairs related to Israel and Palestine, to be followed by a jazz concert, because Gilad Atzmon is a very well-known saxophonist, and he's got record albums out, and he's been touring with his band. And we detailed on how various pro-Israel groups around New York were trying to get it shut down. They were putting pressure on the venue. They'd actually gotten other venues to reject the presentation, and Gilad finally found somebody who stood firm, and apparently all of the bad-mouthing in the local media had no effect, or it had the band in Boston effect, because apparently they had a huge turnout there to listen to the discussion and to listen to some really, really great jazz. So congratulations to Gilad. We're going to take another phone call. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, it's a little off course from what you've been talking about. It's just an observation, and it's just referring to the vaccine issues, the mandatory vaccines, and government saying it's safe. That I remember when I was in basic training, and this is before I had any kind of medical training whatsoever, because I got that later. But I remember they had us in basic training, our flight, about 50 guys walking around and with plastic bags and picking up debris off the ground, and we were told to pick up pigeon feathers. And but at that time I had no medical knowledge, but now I know about histoplasmosis and all the other diseases that pigeons carry. And I'm thinking, here's a government that's telling us to pick up all these pigeon feathers and putting us in harm's way already at that time, and they're the same ones that are now pitching these vaccines as being safe. And I just had to laugh about it, thinking I was young, 20 years old, I didn't know, and I was told to just pick these feathers up, and while walking around picking up, possible diseased feathers from pigeons. I just can't get over how the same government is the same one that's telling us that these things are safe, and I know they're not. So. Well,
remember 9/11, the head of the EPA told all those first responders it was perfectly okay to go into all that debris without any protection, and those responders are dealing with cancers, mesothelioma from all of the asbestos. The government will casually send huge numbers of people off to their deaths to serve whatever purpose they think they need. During the height of above-ground nuclear testing in Nevada, they wanted to run an exercise about blowing a breach in the enemy lines with a small nuclear weapon, and they had a whole bunch of soldiers whose only protection were sunglasses. Their assignment was to run through the aftermath of the nuclear blast and get to the rear echelon areas of the simulated enemy force. And they spent the rest of their lives with cancers and leukemia, and the attitude of the government was, well, if you're in the military, bad things are going to happen to you, and just basically abandon them.
Well, did you mention that? I worked in a hospital in Utah, and I remember getting all those, what we called patients downwinders from all the nuclear testing, and they came in, and they were very ill and sick with different cancers and all died. They're probably pretty much all gone now. But I remember that, the downwinders. But the last thing I want to leave you with is that I've just noticed today, listening to a lot of internet radio, that they're pushing military reserves right now quite heavily, right before the graduation for colleges, and I assume it's because there's no jobs available. But also, we remember as we were growing up, the easiest way to get out of a conflict or war was to join the National Guard. Now we know that's the first way to get into a war. So just notice that they're playing those commercials an awful lot right now.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of recruiting commercials here. And again, you're right. A big part of what is supporting military recruitment is not the glory of war, but the fact that there are no other options for young people. And again, Claire and I saw this ourselves with that young group of people who'd signed up for the Air Force. And we were just saying, why did you join? And they said it was that or homelessness because of the depressed job market and the terrible wartime economy.
Well, that's exactly what brought me to the military back in 1981, a very, very bad economy. That's what got me in, Same situation.
When I was in high school, I actually briefly considered joining the Air Force, but I figured with my eyesight, I'd spend my entire time repairing helicopter transmissions or something like that. All right, thank you for the call, Steve. We're going to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be back with more news. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as you're probably aware, the Pentagon wants to update our weapons to deal with the increased threat from, well, whoever they're imagining is threatening us this week. And they're reacting to some of the heavy armor in other countries by planning an upgrade to the current fleet of Abrams tanks. And it's called Active Protection Systems, and basically it is an add-on to the Abrams that uses sensors and radar and very fast computers to basically detect incoming enemy fire such as RPGs and other anti-tank guided missiles and intercept them way out before they can get close to the tank and detonate. And it sounds really good. Sounds like it'd be a lot of fun to work on. But I see a problem here, and it gets back to the comment I made about an over-reliance on active defensive systems versus passive heavy armor, because we already know Russia's electronic warfare capability appears to be the best in the world. We know they paralyzed the Donald Cook, and they may have had a hand in driving so many of those cruise missiles off course during the recent launch into Syria. We don't know that, but if they didn't, then it tells us those cruise missiles have a terrible, terrible failure rate, more than 50%. But it looks to me like this active protection system can probably be jammed or blinded in order to allow the anti-tank munitions to get through. So I'm not sure how much benefit this is going to be. Certainly it's going to cost a lot of money, and somebody's going to make some bucks on it. Now, getting on over into politics, Bob Woodward was on Fox News Sunday, basically talking about this Trump dossier, about the prostitutes and the Moscow hotel and everything. Basically, it's garbage. It's a garbage document. It had no provenance whatsoever, and the intelligence chief should apologize to Trump. And yes, they should. This was a smear job, plain and simple, for political gain. And I think some of these people ought to be fired over that, because the job of an intelligence agency is to provide the most accurate and factual information to the government, so that the government is not making critical decisions on the basis of guesswork, because that can lead to disasters. They get caught up in magical thinking, or it may have been this, or they're taking guesswork and putting their seal of approval on it. It creates a very dangerous situation where somebody might make a decision on the basis of totally inaccurate information that can lead to another war. Okay, we're going to take another phone call. Charlie in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, how you doing? What's on my mind is, if you remember back in 2006 when Israel went into southern Lebanon, it was the Russian anti-tank weapon that Hezbollah used to blow them out of there. They sent them back home with their tail between their legs, and I wouldn't trust any anti-tank missile in a tank. They'll blow the Abrams tank right off the ground.
Well, the Abrams is old technology, to the best of my knowledge. I mean, they tried to put reactive armor on it as one possible stopgap. But generally, I mean, the history of weapons development is going to be that as you develop better bullets and better armor, the bullets are generally going to get through, because the armor has to remain intact, keep its physical integrity. The bullet doesn't. And some of the anti-tank munitions are basically literally making themselves into a spray of hot liquid, is one of the warheads. I forget the name of that one. They're using depleted uranium darts on it, Hesh rounds, it's very, very difficult. Tank warfare is an ugly business, and I'll tell you this, I have to take my hats off to anybody who serves in tanks, or for that matter, submarines. Because it is very easy to suffer a horrific death in there. And I've been in enough tanks to realize they're very uncomfortable, And it is. It's just a slugfest out there.
Well, it's basically made anything that carries, personnel. I mean, these things, if you could just go, you can go on YouTube and see how these things operate. I mean, that Abrams tank was just totally blown away. And if that's what we have, you can't even go over there. You can't even get on the ground over there and be safe, because these things are operated by one man. They can hide in the bushes at 2,500 feet.
Yes.
So the playing field has been equalized by technology, and it's not a very good job to have. And I think most of these guys know what's going on. So I think they're probably having a shortage of tankers.
I would not be surprised at all. And this whole active protection system may be being created more to reassure the tank crews that they can survive a battle than to actually help them survive a battle. I remember a story.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, well, no, it does work. I remember years and years ago there was a big stink that came on out where naval aviators were being given these little packets of shark repellent as part of their kit if they had to eject from the aircraft. And it was just one of the ways of saying, yeah, you're going to go into the water, there may be sharks, don't worry, put this in the water and the sharks will stay away. Then somebody actually found out the sharks actually liked the stuff. It drew them on in. And that shark repellent was actually created to reassure the pilots, to make them brave, to send them out over the ocean, confident and serene that they would survive no matter what happened to them.
Okie doke, Mike. Talk to you later.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now then, another little article here. How the Russia spin got so much torque. And it's now pretty well established that all of this Russia hacking, Russia interference was created right after Hillary Clinton lost the election. And apparently campaign manager Robbie Mook and campaign chair John Podesta assembled all of the communications team at the Brooklyn headquarters to basically engineer the talking points, that the election wasn't honest, that it had been interfered with by Russia, by Russia, by Russia. And it's another example of people not taking responsibility for their own failings and faults. Now, the Democratic Party has actually come on out and said, here's what really happened. Basically, Hillary's base didn't get out to the polls. And Trump's did. Sorry, Rachel Maddow, about your Russia conspiracy theory, but do you remember back during the campaign the photos of the Donald Trump rallies and the huge stadium crowds he had, and the Hillary Clinton gatherings, which were 20, 30 people? Sometimes you put her own campaign workers in front, so the cameras made it look like even more people had showed up. That was the giveaway right there, that Hillary's base was not mobilized. But that hasn't stopped Hillary Clinton from still being on out there screaming that I was on the way to winning until Comey and the Russian WikiLeaks. Now, in terms of Comey and the email investigation, again, she's not taking responsibility for her own decisions. Had Hillary played by the rules at the State Department, if her campaign had played by the rules, if her staff had played by the rules, there never would have been an FBI investigation to begin with. So Hillary has to own that one. She never will, but she has to. And as far as the Russian hack of the DNC, the one company that was allowed to examine the DNC servers, CloudStrike, has now backed off, saying that they know it was Russia. They've been called by other security companies on several major flaws in their analysis. So even they're saying, no, we're not sure what happened. The best information we have is that Seth Rich leaked the information, carried it out of there on a flash drive, and gave it to somebody who gave it to WikiLeaks. And, of course, Seth Rich was murdered shortly thereafter. That's what's going on out there. But Hillary Clinton is still out there saying it's the Russians did it, the Russians are on Donald Trump's side. Well, recent events doesn't really look like that at all. We're going to take another phone call. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. I think it was the previous caller. He was talking about a shortage of guys in tanks. Is the military developing unmanned tanks? Because I've seen videos of Russian unmanned vehicles.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. They've already developed and deployed driverless supply trucks to just bring stuff to the front line without risking a human driver, because those civilian drivers are paid huge amounts of money to take that risk. And so now they have these driverless trucks. One of them was shown on Top Gear before the departure of Jeremy Clarkson and James May and Richard Hammond. And by the way, the new Top Gear, it's a good show here. But the old Top Gear showed this truck and how it could go over all this terrain, and it could be totally autonomous or it could be remotely driven. And I would imagine at some point a remotely controlled or an autonomous tank is probably out there being developed. Now, the problem with any remote control device is it can be jammed. And the danger with an autonomous tank is that if its software misidentifies a friendly, you're going to see somebody friendly get blown up. So there are some theoretical issues with it.
You know, by going to another subject, you may recall David Halberstam's book, The Best and the Brightest.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess that was regarding the men who got us into Vietnam.
Yes.
Even today's generation of leaders, you know, I guess they call themselves the best and the brightest. Many of them are Rhodes Scholars. They've gone to Harvard Law School. Look at the mess that they've gotten this country into. Close to $21 trillion in debt, a permanent state of war, and these wars don't affect anything. They don't bring democracy and peace and prosperity to these countries. All they do is bring death and chaos. Look at these best and the brightest. Look what these men and women have done to this country and the world. And now they're taking us to the brink of nuclear war. And if they mess up, they stumble, they just go into their bunkers that we paid for. And as you said, we're not going to be allowed to get in there. That's the best and the brightest. Look what they've done to this world.
Well, I understand David Halberstam is working on a new updated book called The Worst and the Stupidest. Okay?
Oh. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you. We're going to let you go here. Now, at this point, the Democratic Party is in serious, serious trouble. They're trying to stay relevant. They don't really have a leader left anymore. Hillary is basically fading into history, no matter how much screeching she does. Bernie Sanders is still being rejected by the DNC and the leadership. So they don't really have anybody. They don't have anybody who's up and coming for 2020. If I could place a suggestion, Tulsi Gabbard. And so they don't have a message other than the ones they've been regurgitating all the time about, oh, there's racism, there's sexism, we've got to be politically correct. And that is starting to wear out as well. People are realizing they were had when they were fanned up to be angry about race or angry about microaggressions or angry about all the rest of it. We were all had. We were royally had. And so that is failing. So they don't have a leader. They don't have a message. And right now it seems like the Democratic Party, all they've really got is the resist Trump message. We're going to resist Trump. We're going to resist Trump. And that really isn't enough, I think, to hold together a voting coalition. Now, as we mentioned the other day, Supreme Court Justice Kennedy is getting ready to retire, and that opens up another Supreme Court seat for Donald Trump to fill. And Roger Stone is reporting that the list of potential Supreme Court nominees does have Judge Napolitano on it. And I think that would be really very, very cool, because he's made a lot of sense over the years with what he's saying on TV. I would hope that he would carry that awareness, that mindset onto the bench. But time will solve that mystery. Meanwhile, George Soros has found himself a new enemy that he can spend his money and influence on. And it is an Article 5 convention resolution. Now, everyone's talking about a peaceful way to change what's going on in this country. And if you go into the Constitution under Article 5, there are actually two ways to change the Constitution. The first is an act of Congress signed by the President and then ratified by 3/4 of the states. The second way most people are unaware of is the states themselves can directly propose a change to the Constitution through what is called an Article 5 convention. And there's a growing movement in many states to have such a convention and try and fix some of the problems with that Constitution. And Soros is looking at this as a potential threat to his push toward globalism. And apparently he is now lobbying and spending money going into these states, trying to basically talk down, lobby down the willingness of the states to engage in an Article 5 convention. But at this point, that might be the very last thing that is going to save this country before it gets to violence. And I got to tell you, I am very dismayed. I'm very upset over all the emails I get and the occasional phone calls where everybody's saying, we can't wait any longer, we're going to have to take this government on. And I've run out of ideas. I would still like to see more of a Soviet Union-style collapse, but I understand people are angry. We see it all around us, everywhere we go. We see it in reckless, crazy driving, a tendency toward anger. Even people who don't really understand what's going on have a sense that something has gone horribly wrong with this country, and they're very, very upset. Now, getting on to the issue of the corporate media, there have been reports that with co-president Bill Shine leaving the company, that Sean Hannity might follow him. And according to this story over in The Last Great Stand, they were talking about how Sean Hannity and Bill Shine may be the core of a brand new conservative news network to take the place of the now left-leaning Fox News. Unfortunately, that story appears to be little more than a rumor. Sean Hannity has come on out and said he is not, in fact, leaving Fox News. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Glenn in Philadelphia. Glenn, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You know, with all this robotic and drone stuff, if it follows out to its logical conclusion, we could see a war where it's like completely robotic on both sides. It's just kind of like the big, like a really scaled-up version of the cable TV show Robot Wars.
Yes, maybe, but again, in terms of the cost involved, if you look at how much these things cost, obviously human troops are much less expensive, especially if part of the goal of the war is to thin out the human population in the enemy's country.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of the one James Bond movie where he played a video game. Sean Connery played a video game against the villain where they electrocute you every time you get hit. You know, this kind. We just have the leaders, you know, go and play this video game, and whoever loses, loses.
Yeah, that was the remake of Thunderball. I forget the name of the actual movie, but that's basically what it was, a remake of Thunderball. I would love to see wars settled by the leaders getting into an arena with a couple of swords and having at each other. I think one of the good things about the way war used to be fought, where the leaders got out in front and led their own troops, is there was an automatic incentive not to go to war unless you really, really had to. But today, when our leaders are safe at home inside their air-conditioned bunkers and everything, there's no impediment. They're going to keep on going to war until they run out of money and run out of people.
Yeah, exactly. I hear that they may want large numbers of deaths, but I thought of one thing about that the cruise missile attack on the Syrian airfield.
Yes.
You know, you were talking about not knowing, you know, what sort of anti-missile, you know, equipment they had in terms of electronics or the S-300, 400 missile systems. You're probably familiar with the Wild Weasel system, right, which is designed to go in, you know, a fighter plane goes in and gets them to light up their surface-to-air missile radars.
It's an anti-radar, yeah, it's an anti-radar platform. Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of wondering, maybe there was sort of a Wild Weaselish element to this cruise missile attack to try and assess their responses. They had a bunch of cruise missiles whose expiration dates were coming up, and they thought maybe they'd give a chance to assess the S-300 300 NIST, 400 missile systems, and any other electronic systems that might have been used against them. I'm just kind of wondering if that.
Oh yeah, and that would apply not just to the missile radars, but to the electronic jamming. Because you don't really want to use it unless you're making a point, which is what Russia was doing on the Donald Cook, because it's a certainty that the Donald Cook's electronic warfare people were making recordings of whatever signals were being directed at them in order to break them down and find out what was going on.
Exactly. So I wouldn't be surprised if, and even if that wasn't the original intent, certainly you're going to gather as much information as you could from whatever happened to try and develop your systems. So we'll have to see. But that's all I really had. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. When you have a system like this, you don't turn it on without a good reason, because the other side is going to be recording those signals and figuring out what it is you're really doing. And maybe the systems that were on the Russian plane that overflew the Donald Cook were older, no longer frontline systems, just to keep everybody guessing. But I really do think this over-reliance on technology represents the same strategic mistake Nazi Germany did toward the end of the war. They bet everything on the V-1 and the V-2 and their stealth jet. They actually had one. It never saw service. And it failed to turn the tide of the war. We're going to take another break here for station identification. We've got another caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're going to take a couple more phone calls here. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You know, when we talk about these robots and stuff like that, especially when it starts to get autonomous and artificial intelligence, this is why these leaders, the United States and Russia and other advanced countries, sit down and stop this. Because not only is it a threat to the nuclear war, well, it could be triggered off anyway. I'm sure you saw the Terminator movie, right? Yeah, I know you have something to do with Hollywood and everything.
Yes.
Anyway.
I didn't work on those movies, but I'm very familiar with them.
Okay. Now, you know, I know people think it's silly, but I believe that Cameron made those movies for a reason. And the possibility is that these robots get too intelligent, too autonomous, and may at some point turn against us. Especially when we put in the whole thing about the original Terminator is that there was a nuclear war started by the machines themselves. They triggered off a nuclear confrontation between the United States and Russia.
Yes.
And this could happen. People don't understand it. We're fooling around with technology we don't really understand. I don't know where this technology even comes from. You know, I don't know if you believe in Roswell, if you believe that ship landed in Roswell or not. I tend to believe it. I mean, there's a lot of proof about it. I mean, when you look at some of these shows on the History Channel and all that, and yeah, I've even done some reading on it. It seems almost certain that some kind of an alien spaceship landed. And
well, we're going to have to agree to disagree on that. My understanding of what happened at Roswell was that the United States was flying a series of very high altitude balloons carrying very thin sheets of aluminum to pick up upper atmospheric particles, trying to analyze Russia's nuclear tests by just waiting for the fallout to blow to our side of the planet. I forget the name of the project, but one of the balloons came down on that ranch, and rather than admit they were snooping on the Russians, somebody said, well, we recovered a crashed UFO, and of course it went crazy, and then he came back and said, no, it wasn't a UFO, and it spawned this whole cottage industry. One of the ways that we know there has not been an outside introduction of technology is there's no great leap forward. If you look at any technology, you can look at its family tree, its heritage, where it came from, tracing it all the way back. And obviously, if somebody were to come in with some new amazing technology and it were introduced, there wouldn't be a precedent for it. You couldn't look back and say, oh, this came from something else. And we don't see any of those. So
you don't think these mini computers don't? You don't think these mini computers don't show some kind of a technology that jumped forward out of nowhere?
No, actually, most of the mini computers technology was developed during the Apollo Moon project.
Yeah, but that was after Roswell. talk about this in
Okay.
1947.
All right, Mark. We've agreed to disagree on this particular issue, and I've given you my reply on that. So thank you very much. We're going to let you
All right,
go.
but what about the other thing I told you? What about the other thing?
What other thing?
About the autonomous robots. About the autonomous robots. The possibility that they could actually act in their own, possibly, try to take over and even cause a nuclear confrontation.
Certainly possible. Could be a damaged circuit. Could be bad programming. What they're discovering now with the first ventures into artificial intelligence is they're getting some very unexpected behavior, and the AIs are developing personalities and behavior that were certainly not intended by the designers. And
there you go.
Yeah, there's definitely a real danger there. I think one of the reasons I think one of the reasons our global economy is in such trouble is that too much of the economic financial decisions are being made on this giant global computer network that has only one instinct: acquire more wealth, acquire more wealth, acquire more wealth, and it's very destabilizing to the economy as a whole.
I think the very idea of having driverless cars, I think that's, if nothing else, that's extremely dangerous. And in other ways, it takes away people's ability to think and move and do anything else on their own.
Yeah.
It's just taking things too far.
Did you ever see the animated movie WALL-E about the little trash picking up robot, and he gets onto that giant spaceship where all of Earth's surviving population is, and after generation of just being taken care of and served by robots, they're just these blobs of protoplasm that don't even stand up anymore, and that's a very real possible trend. If you reach a point where human labor is no longer necessary, what happens to the humans is a very important question. But as far as the AIs are concerned, yeah, there's a real danger there. And looking at the recklessness with which other advanced technologies like GMO are rushed onto the marketplace without really being sure they're going to be safe, it's going to be a problem. And it's rather interesting. William Gibson, in his book Neuromancer, and I think the follow-on one, Burning Chrome, really goes into the dangers of AIs, and he basically wrote about a society that realized they needed the AIs, but they never trusted them, and there was a special police force that would always keep an eye on them to make sure they weren't doing something they weren't supposed to do.
Well, yeah, you even had that movie recently, Chappie. We had it actually took place in South Africa. We had the robot police force, and they still had to be controlled by humans. Then one of the robots developed his own intelligence and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason these Hollywood producers are putting this stuff out. I think they know something that we don't know.
No, it's just prognostication. Anybody who's involved in computers can look ahead and see where it's all going based on past trends. Anyway, Mark, I'm going to let you go. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to take another phone call from Sherry in Fredericksburg. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. I wish I've got an echo here. I guess you can hear me okay.
Are you on a speakerphone?
Yep. I kept it on. I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I wish people could think in terms of, and this is naturally has to come from a little woman here, but nevertheless, imploding the system instead of exploding it. Think of it collapsing on itself, because if you see the movie Gandhi, see the 1982 movie Gandhi with Ben Kingsley.
Oh, I love that movie.
The second hour of the movie where people are just peacefully protesting, but they're standing up to the government and the system, and see what happens to them. This will herald in martial law faster than anything. You've already talked about it. There's ways you can implode the system. There's a reason there's so much war and cops and crime and punishment and all that stuff on TV. No weather channels on any of the networks anymore. Just all, crime stuff. They want to generate this so they can come in and see that movie, see what happens to men, women, and children when they try to stand up to a really corrupt, desperate system. but there are ways of imploding it, let it collapse in on itself, like the getting out of debt and stuff like that. I hate this mindset like it's going to work. It'll bring in martial law, you know. It'll be beyond what the police want to deal with. Don't you think?
Again, we know that tyrannical regimes are very brutal with their captive populations. There was certainly the Amritsar massacre that happened while Gandhi was trying to break India free of British rule. But again, the way he dealt with it, where the people just walked up and they got beat up and they didn't fight back, in the media, it did turn public opinion against Great Britain. Today, with the controlled media, that probably isn't going to work because our media only shows us what the government wants us to see.
Okay. Well, all right. So, do you think taking guns to the streets and fighting against this government we have going here is going to be the answer?
I'm trying to avoid it. I'm trying to figure out a way that we can get this country back on track to being a republic without civil war or revolution in the streets, because the wrong people get killed in those things. But again, as I said the other day, I've run out of ideas. And it gets all the way back to that quote from President John F. Kennedy. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And it's sounding to me like we're there. Phone call.
We are there.
Well, exactly.
Martial law. I want to avoid it. You know, I want to be able to go into town when I want to go to the grocery store and stuff. I don't want to have to pass checkpoints. Just think in terms of anything you can do in your life to implode the system, make it weaker. That's all. That's just a different mindset. And, you know, I'm sorry we have to be inundated with so much crime. We can't see something to even comedy lets us down now. You know, where's George Carlin when you need him?
Well, I agree. He's passed away. Well, one of the reasons for all the crime shows is to keep up the level of fear. Stay in your home. Don't go out. The criminals are going to get you. And, yeah, crime is rampant. And with all of the refugees coming on in, crime is going up again.
I just wish we didn't have to fight fire with fire. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Mike.
Well, you're welcome. I absolutely do not want to see that happen. I absolutely do not want to. I do not want to see.
It's going to affect us all.
It will affect us all. But I'm talking about the people who inevitably are going to be killed and crippled in this thing. Go back and look at some of the photos from those earlier wars about what happens to those people, and like the American Civil War. And, yeah, it's something to be avoided, but, again, I've run out of ideas.
Yeah, well, maybe everyone can look into their own lives personally and see what they can do. And if that's done collectively, maybe that'll make a difference. I don't know. That's all I can suggest. It's very frustrating to hear them wanting to take to the streets, because then they'll bring in the strong arms. And the police are really going to be on our side anyway, because they have families. They don't want their families to be, you know, shut down and people in the streets unsafe for their families. The police aren't going to be the answer, because they're like us. They're just, a lot of them aren't going to have it in them to take on that strong arm. They're going to have to get it from armed forces.
I would caution you and recommend that you look up something called the Stanley Milgram experiment on authority. Which found that the vast majority of people will cause pain to others, total strangers, if they believe some figure in authority says it's okay. And it's one of the worst features of the human psyche, but it is there. And it explains why large populations will follow a tyrannical ruler into committing all kinds of atrocities. It is a feature of the human mind, and you have to take that into account when you're trying to figure out what's going on. Sherry, we're going to let you go. We're going to switch over to Frank in North Carolina. Frank, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Okay, good. Hey, I'm an agnostic on the subject of aliens, extraterrestrial contact, and UFOs and all that. I mean, I believe in UFOs. I've actually seen a few strange things myself, but I've never been convinced but it's extraterrestrial. And but you spoke of the cottage industry, and that's why I'm calling. You spoke of the cottage industry that springs up around these things like the Roswell incident and whatnot. And, there's a lot of people that really believe it. I remember I really got into it. I read a book. I forget the author's name, but it was called Above Top Secret or something like that back in the early 90s. And the guy was really convincing. He said he worked there at Area 51 and everything. But, William Cooper, Behold a Pale Horse. I only made it about maybe half or maybe 2/3 of the way through that book because I couldn't get over the wild. Maybe whatever. Maybe it's true, but just all these these craft, these underwater submersible UFOs and all this different thing. And I'm just thinking, I just don't know about all this, but there are a lot of people out there that are on the radio. They come on late at night. People, they're on with on Coast to Coast and a lot of other programs out there too. I listen to a lot of talk radio over the phone because I don't have internet or TV. But these people have elaborate backgrounds. They were the top of their fields. They were top, classified, top secret, high up in the military and top secret programs and everything. And they swear up and down that the Nazis, were given, the reptilians gave them technology and that they're controlling things up under the flat Earth and everything now. And
all right, okay, Frank.
What's your opinion of that?
Well, I'm about to give it to you right now. Let me state my position here very clearly. First of all, I have concluded that the universe is going to be full of life of all different kinds of chemistries under all sorts of different conditions. And the reason Hollywood always likes, or up until the age of computer animation, the reason Hollywood always had space aliens looking like humans is it was the cheapest way to go. As long as you put them in spandex and all of a sudden it's a space alien. That being said, I can't, if you imagine a technology that is advanced enough to travel between stars, then parallel with it, their culture and society has advanced as well. And so to a culture like that, we are probably as primitive as somebody dancing in the jungle with a bone through their nose. And frankly, I can't think of any reason why such an advanced civilization would even be interested in us. When you're driving down the highway, do you stop and investigate every anthill you pass? No, it just isn't worth it. And space travel, I don't care how advanced your technology is, it's still going to be very expensive to go from world to world to world. And the odds that some space alien is going to land on this planet and be able to walk out of their ship with a T-shirt and slacks on is remote. They will probably find our planet as toxic to them as we would find, for example, the surface of Venus. And so I really don't see why it would happen. Now, that being said, one of the interesting exercises to do is to go and look at the history of Hollywood producing TV series and movies on this theme of flying saucers and extraterrestrial visitors, and then overlay it on the development of the Black Project aircraft. And you will find that they line up, because the government itself put out a lot of this UFO stuff. Project Blue Book wasn't there to investigate UFOs. It was there to sell the idea that this might actually be true. Because if you're out there in the deserts of Nevada and you see $1 trillion of taxpayer money whiz overhead, you're then going to run into the nearest bar and say, I just saw a flying saucer in an alien spaceship, and nobody's going to pay attention to you. Certainly not any foreign intelligence agents who are walking around that part of the world. So that was the reason for that, so that people who actually spotted Black Project aircraft in development would assume it was a UFO and be dismissed by the general public.
I agree.
Okay? All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and we're going to start with TJ in Valley Forge. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Big fan calling from Valley Forge. First, I have a couple quick comments. One was a comment you made about the Moab last week. But first, I want to give you a challenge, and that is ask that you provide me your email, and I'd like to send you some information going back to the 2000-ish time period where the Mars Global surveyor satellite came out. I am a professional geologist and was looking at the information that was coming from NASA, basically available real time on that satellite information. And after going through a substantial number of images, I ran into specific areas where I was encountering things that utterly shocked me because it didn't correspond to any known, geological processes.
Okay, well, we're almost at the commercial break here, so all you need to do is go to whatreallyhappened.com, and right up at the top, just under where you see my picture, there's a little white menu, and the fourth item over is email WRH, and you can put the stuff in there, and I will take a look at it. And obviously, Mars is of personal interest to me because of my experiences with Viking. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines for a bit because I do need to get back to the news here. Jeff in Minnesota, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, well, have you ever read the book The Day After Roswell by Colonel Russell, I guess it was, who stated that he worked in the White House and his job was to distribute all the technology found on this crashed UFO.
All right, Jeff. Okay, I think I've already said what my position on this is, and I think with respect, I'm going to just go ahead and drop the call here now. I don't want to get any more phone calls about UFOs and space aliens. We're not that kind of a show. We're here to talk about things that are existing in the real world. By the way, I did remember the name of that balloon project that led to the Roswell incident. It was called Project Mogul. And as I mentioned before, it was a series of these very high-altitude balloons that were carrying these sheets of metal and plastic to trap radioactive particles from the Russian nuclear tests. And it was ultra top secret. And that's why they came out with, it's the wreck of a UFO, without really thinking it through what was going to happen from that. All right, so getting on to the economic news. Yesterday we were talking about how there was a run on Home Capital Bank up in Canada. And now the contagion has spread to another Canadian mortgage lender, Equitable Group. And they're starting to see a drop in their deposit balances as well. So we may be seeing the beginning of a little bit of an economic panic up there in Canada, which will not stay in Canada, unfortunately. Another article, very troubling, coming out of Goldcore, is they're saying that London's property bubble is very fragile and could crash. They've been seeing a huge real estate run up there because everybody goes along with this conventional wisdom that real estate represents a safe haven for your wealth. And, of course, that was the conventional wisdom in the United States prior to the 2008 meltdown. Now, the money junkies, they love the bubbles. They ride them up, sell out at the top. Everybody else gets to eat the losses here. Interesting story here out of Zero Hedge. The 30-year Treasury yield has dropped back below 3% due to the declining economic data. And apparently the actual sales numbers coming out of the first quarter have really missed the mark on estimates, and the estimates were being made in light of the current economic conditions. But they're even worse than the experts were predicting. Now, here's a very alarming story, and it tells us just how much a slave we are to those banks. This story is coming out of Zero Hedge. Again, 45% of Americans are spending up to half their income repaying credit card debts. And that is a huge amount of money that is being paid out in the interest. Debt is how you are enslaved. That's what it exists for. The money junkies know the actual ink and paper is just fairy tale stuff. There's no intrinsic, inherent value to any of it, or the numbers in the computer. It is that manufactured awareness of indebtedness that makes you their slave. Another article, this out of Government Slaves, the U.S. healthcare sector may be on the verge of a Lehman Brothers style collapse because of the failure of Obamacare, the inability of people to avail themselves of medical services. They had a huge buildup, all these expensive hospitals and everything, and it may be looking at a major stumble here. Now, people are still screaming about the emergency spending measure. The Ron Paul Institute had an article out there saying bipartisan budget means more spending, and that's exactly what it was. Spending more on all kinds of things except the border wall. And conservatives are very, very angry that apparently they solved the emergency spending bill by making it so big that everyone would vote for what is essentially a bad bill. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the emergency spending bill, which will fund the government up until October 1st. They didn't want to fund the border wall because the Democrats were going to kick up a hissy fit over that. But the new spending bill includes $100 million to counter Russian information operations. In other words, if there is one growth industry in the United States of America, it is lying to the American people. And they call it public relations or countering information operations. But basically, the U.S. government and the corporate media by now must have realized they have lost the trust, confidence, and faith of the American people. And they did it to themselves. I have no sympathy for them. And most people now realize we were lied to about Saddam's nuclear weapons. That's a given. And that's a good starting point for any discussion about anything to do with the corporate media and the U.S. government. You know, they lied to us about Saddam's nuclear weapons. And then you walk them back through all the other lies. Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, and so forth and so on. The question isn't when does the government and corporate media lie to us. The question is really when don't they lie to us? Which is a very rare occurrence, worthy of its own national holiday. Call it Truth Day. The one day in history we were told the truth by the U.S. government here. Now, a lot of people are looking at Trump's new tax plan, and sadly it does appear to be another giveaway to the wealthy. They're eliminating the estate tax, which is very good for the wealthiest Americans who can now leave their fortunes to their heirs without paying any penalty. But apparently analysts are looking at this proposal of eliminating the stepped-up basis on capital gains, which they're saying amounts to a new death tax on the middle class. And again, there is a fundamental reality of economics that nobody seems to be picking up on. And that is for an economy to perpetuate and operate smoothly, currency has to be flowing at all levels of society into all necessary sectors of investment. There must be some mechanism to recycle the money that has accumulated at the top back down to the bottom as decent wages and salaries for working and middle-class people so that they can pay their bills and pay their taxes and go to the shopping malls and buy things, buy new cars. One hallmark of a fascist economic dictatorship is that recycling mechanism doesn't exist, and we don't have one either. The flow of money is always uphill, none of it coming back. And that's why this economy is doomed to have a major collapse somewhere down the road. It's inevitable at this point. Meanwhile, Puerto Rico is about to file the largest public sector bankruptcy in history. And Puerto Rico made a last-ditch offer to avoid a May 1st bankruptcy filing, but failed to negotiate a financial restructuring. They wanted creditors to take a 23% loss on their general obligation bonds and a 42% loss on their COFINA sales tax-backed debt. They were turned down. So Puerto Rico is going to go into bankruptcy. And we're seeing that in a lot of places around the country. Here in the state of Hawaii, there's talk about a default and a bankruptcy because of the loss of tourism and the huge amount of money they have spent on this boondoggle light rail system. Now, another sign of our economic decline is apparently Saudi Aramco, Saudi Arabia's state-owned oil behemoth, has now taken 100% control of the Port Arthur refinery in Texas as of yesterday. They announced the deal last year. Now, Port Arthur is considered the crown jewel of the U.S. refinery system, and it is now owned and operated by Saudi Arabia. Speaking of tourism, a little article came on out in IB Times over in Great Britain. They're calling it the Trump slump. We're hearing that a lot. It's very euphonious. And it's saying that the president's rhetoric and the travel ban are repelling millions of tourists who might be going to the United States. And apparently projections by Pennsylvania U.S.-based Tourism Economics, which is an affiliate of Great Britain's research and analysis outfit Oxford Economics, says the U.S. could see 4.3 million fewer international tourists, equating to a revenue loss of $7.4 billion. Now, I don't think it's fair to lay the blame for the slump in tourism totally on Donald Trump. We know the TSA's abuses of travelers have resulted in a lot of repeat tourists deciding to go someplace else. We used to have some friends in Great Britain would come out to Hawaii every single year until the TSA started. And they said, we're not coming back. We can't relax when we're treated like POWs coming in and going back out. And, of course, we've got this problem, especially up along the Canadian border, where the police forces are seizing cash from innocent tourists coming down from Canada. And that has spread all over Canada, and now Canadians don't want to come here. Our tourism industry is in serious trouble. Hawaii is a very tourism-dependent state, and we are feeling that pinch. Now, our state tourism authority likes to talk about how we've got an 80% occupancy rate. What they don't talk about are all the resorts and hotels and B&Bs that have just quit. They're all boarded up, especially along that leeward side. They're ghost towns over there. Now, apparently the factory that produces diamond matches and toothpicks, Cloquet, I think it's pronounced, is going to close. They were acquired as part of a larger purchase by Georgia-based Royal Oak Enterprises, and Royal Oak Enterprises has decided that toothpicks and matches aren't really a strong product, and certainly for the matches, I would say that's definitely true here. So another 85 jobs are going there. Now, I was talking before about the recycling. Decent wages and salaries so people can pour the money back into the economy and keep it going. And we're seeing this article, this is out of Post News D2, how the owner of Z Pizza up in Seattle is saying that she is going to close her business because she can't afford the new higher minimum wage. Now, if you are a business, something you need to keep in mind. Your employees collectively are also your customers collectively. When you have a community where there are businesses and they all have employees and they're paying those employees decently, those employees then go on out to the other businesses and spend that money. The more you drive wages and salaries down, the more prices go up. There is no disposable income, and that starts to take businesses down. Now, I understand that minimum wage jobs are not supposed to be a permanent career path, but it is supposed to be the stepping stone for young people who are leaving home to get on out and become independent. And as we keep hearing arguments against a minimum wage increase, we are seeing at the same time more and more young people are just staying at home with their parents. They're not even trying to get on out and get an apartment. And to nobody's surprise, we are now seeing a decline in rents in the 12 hottest U.S. rental markets. There are no people coming on in to rent them, except for the illegal immigrants and the refugees who are getting money from the government. Now, up in Maine, the governor, Paul LePage, is actually suing his own attorney general over Trump's immigration order. And apparently the state's attorney general is seen as having abused her power by joining the legal opposition by early moves by President Trump that LePage's office supported. The governor of the state wants to enforce the immigration laws, the existing immigration laws. There are no new laws. It's just enforce the ones we've got. And his attorney general, in theory, the highest law enforcement official in that state, is opposed. Wants the laws ignored. That's a Title VIII violation right there. So the governor is suing her. We'll see how that comes on out. Now, sometimes the confusion at the borders can get a little out of hand, and innocent people can be hurt. There was a gentleman from Canberra, and he had a visa to visit in the United States for a limited time, and he was up trying to cross the border from the United States into Canada, and for some reason, Canada denied him entry. And 1 hour after his visa expired, the Australian gentleman was arrested and imprisoned by immigration officials. Where is our common sense? If Canada won't let him in, cut the guy some slack to get to an airport. And that kind of treatment is another reason tourism is in decline. Nobody wants to come here anymore. Along with that global image of America as a warmongering nation. When Germany started cranking up, big mistake number 2. Tourism to Germany fell way off. Nobody wanted to go there. They were scared. Now, we're coming up on the French elections as well, the final runoff in another week. And I'm looking at this article at RIF.com where the corporate media, prominent leaders from the globalists, they're just trying to find ways to smear Marine Le Pen. She's gaining the polls. Macron's poll numbers are going down. Hers are going up. And they're trying to reverse that, calling her an extremist for her pro-working class views. They're calling her an extremist for not wanting to be part of the European Union. So I'm expecting massive election fraud over there as well. Apparently, even Germany is getting cool on the EU and the euro. Apparently, according to a study done in 2012, the Deutschmark is still in circulation in Germany to the tune of 13 billion Deutschmark. People in Germany are still using the Deutschmark. They haven't switched all the way over to the euro. And I think that's a good thing because if the EU collapses, Germany will feel the shock of the collapse of the euro a lot less. Oh, the euros are worthless. That's okay. I've got Deutschmark. And it may be why the Deutschmark was never retired was to allow Germany to circumvent a lot of limitations and problems should they decide to leave the European Union, which more and more ordinary Germans are now in favor of. Now, in an act of desperation bordering on the cusp of madness, the Green Party in Great Britain is campaigning for this summer's general election on a promise that if they win, they will have a second referendum on Brexit. And that will have an option to say, oh, the Brexit deal is terrible, we didn't know what we were getting into, we want to stay in the European Union. Something tells me this Green Party is not going to get a lot of votes. Now, as you know, there was this tragic issue with this University of Texas stabbing incident. It was a black gentleman, and apparently he was part of a group that did reenactment of murdering white people with knives. He and his friends would actually go out and pretend that they were attacking white people. I guess it would stab bags full of sawdust or something. But there's another issue here, and we need to call attention to it. Apparently, this suspect was on Zoloft. Remember what I keep telling you about those prescription antidepressants? They interfere with your impulse control. This guy's been out there with his friends practicing murdering white people. And he's out there high on Zoloft. He sees white people and he says, yeah, let's go for it. No inhibition whatsoever. There's another study out showing that SSRI use increases the risk of an intracranial hemorrhage. You just put this stuff out and it's all dangerous. But I'm sure there's going to be some law firm saying, were you injured by your SSRIs? Did you suffer a stroke? Are you partly paralyzed? Well, call this number right now. You may be entitled to a cash settlement, as if a cash settlement makes it all right, that the rest of your life is going to be very different than what you expected. It's one of the problems with a money junkie society. Everybody comes to think that with enough money, you can buy anything, do anything, anything that you do will be forgiven, as long as you have enough money. Reminds me of that scene out of A Tale of Two Cities, where this very wealthy lord runs over a small child in his carriage and kills the child. And his only response is to fling a gold coin at the parents. Now, as you know, a lot of attention is still being focused on the Boston bombing. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's lawyers are filing an appeal to basically void his death sentence. And they've hit a bit of a roadblock in that federal prosecutors are refusing to give the defense 13 documents they say are secret. Now, this obviously is going to make it very difficult to mount a defense when you don't know what you're defending against. And I'm sure that the powers that be want Dzhokhar Tsarnaev to go away as quickly as possible because he's become another embarrassment to them. Because we all know there is a reasonable doubt. I mean, Dzhokhar's attorney, his defense lawyer, went on in first day in the trial, said, yeah, he did it, but there are exonerating circumstances. Of course they're going to give him the death penalty. But I did post under this article a flashback image that shows the remains of the actual bombs at the Boston Marathon. They were in black backpacks with this square white patch on top. The Tsarnaev brothers were wearing gray backpacks. There was a man in a black jacket and khaki pants who had a black backpack with the white patch on the top before the bombing, and he was photographed after the bombing, did not have the backpack anymore. And he was part of a team, all dressed identically, black jacket, khaki pants. And we don't need to know who he is or where he went. That is your reasonable doubt to convict. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go ahead and reopen the phone lines, 800-313-9443, and I'm going to ask you, no phone calls about space aliens, UFOs, or Roswell, okay? This show deals with the reality of life here on Earth. Now, there have been a couple of tragedies which are probably going to wind up in prosecutions. One of them was over in Utah. And apparently there was a prisoner, and I don't know if this has become a standard form of torture, but this Madison Jensen basically died of dehydration. She was refused water, and she was begging for her life, and now there's a lawsuit. And authorities are declining to release surveillance video that would show Jensen's care during her time in jail. Saying it's none of your business, but she died of dehydration. And apparently over in Milwaukee, same thing again. A grand jury has recommended criminal charges against 7 Milwaukee County Jail staffers in the dehydration death of an inmate who went without water for 7 days. If you go without water for 3 days, you are already in serious, serious, serious trouble. We're becoming a very brutal nation. Now, I want to talk a little bit about computers. We are still dealing with some problems out here on the island of Oahu, and it's kind of hard to pin down exactly what's going on. But ever since Spectrum took over Time Warner, it's gotten really, really bad. We posted a link to the Spectrum outage map. And calling tech support really does no good. You're going to sit there for 20, 30 minutes on hold, and tech support seems like their agenda is to convince you that this is all your fault. Reboot the cable modem, reboot the router, plug a computer directly in the cable modem, all of which I do before I call tech service, but it just goes on and on. But looking at the Spectrum outage map, it's Spectrum itself all over the country. And remember, they were sued by the state of New York last February for failing to deliver the promised bandwidth. And right now, when I first signed on the computer early this morning, the performance was better, but it's gone downhill. And it is really affecting us. We're only getting about 10% of the bandwidth we're supposed to be getting. And I'm not the only person who's complaining about it right now. Over at the forum for Time Warner Cable, which is still running under that name, there was a whole category of Spectrum is one of the worst cable internet companies. And there's the post I was looking at was almost by way of apology. I used to complain about Time Warner, but oh boy, they were so much better than Spectrum. And they're talking about all the difficulties to try and get a secure, reliable, high-speed connection. We're going to take a break for station identification. More about Spectrum and poor internet service after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. But before I take phone calls, I do want to finish up on this issue about the computer performance under Spectrum. And I was just looking all over the net. Everybody's complaining about this company. Over at DSLreports.com, they're talking about another acquisition. When Spectrum took over Bright House, the internet slowed way, way down. And people were complaining their bills are going up, the service is going down. Well, that's life under fascism. Now, a lot of people were calling Spectrum and asking, are you throttling the lines? And the official response you will get from management and tech support is, no, we are not throttling the lines. But there's actually a document on Charter's own website under network management where they talk about in order to deal with congestion on the network, they enforce speed reduction. It's not throttling, it's enforcing speed reduction. So we're not really throttling. We're merely enforcing speed reduction. Well, for us end users, that's pretty much the same thing, and they're trying to weasel word out of the fact that they are not delivering what they are selling us, which is what resulted in that New York State lawsuit, and I think other states ought to come on board here, because we've reached a stage in our society where companies are just selling us inferior products, whether it's internet access or vaccines or GMOs, and they're getting away with it. And that really should not be allowed to happen. All right, we have a couple of phone calls. Gaither in Oklahoma, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, not much, Mike. Hey, Pakalolo to you, too. And I was going to say about that lady that called earlier that was scared to death we're all going to go to the streets with their guns.
Yes.
And us people, we got to quit thinking so lineal. It's not like that. It doesn't happen like everybody ain't going to run out in the street with their guns. But what we do need to do is we do need to get a small venue and have a large amount of people show up. And that's these people, these guys, they don't have the numbers. We have outnumbered them so much. It's crazy. Quit getting in your head, everybody. The government's behind every push. They're all going to get us. They're going to drum this. It ain't going to be that way. What's going to happen is we're going to finally get up off our chair. We're going to go out. And then they're going to be scared to death, and I'm going to run and hide. That's what these people are.
It's going to take a large crowd to do that. It's going to take a large crowd. Small protests don't work. We learned that the hard way during the Iraq War. People were out in the streets, even here in Hawaii. I shot videos of it and everything. And the government just isn't listening. They're getting all their money from large corporations. The elections are completely rigged. They don't feel they have to listen to us. We just exist to give them money and new soldiers and new workers. But I think if 4, maybe 5 million Americans walked into Washington, D.C., that might send a message. Because, again, going back to Lyndon Johnson, he wrote that when he saw 1 million people on the mall protesting against Vietnam, that's when he knew that they were going to lose that war.
Well, you get 100,000 people show up in one town armed, that'll give a message.
Again, I don't go armed. It's exactly what the government would like to see happen in order to declare a national emergency and martial law. Okay.
Can you imagine 100,000 people with arms and then no one got hurt? Where would all the gun laws go then? You know, that's just it. You can't have 100,000 idiots. You're right, but I'll tell you what, if you had regular people and enforced it, I'll tell you what, you'd make a showing. You don't need 4 million people to beat, 23,000 idiots? You know what I'm saying? You don't need that. And they don't have they don't have every bomb underneath every one of their thumbs. They don't.
Well, actually, they're running out of bombs right now. They've bombed so many people in the rest of the world, they're running out of bombs. But they do have lots of guns and lots of tanks, and we're going to have to follow a Gandhi-esque approach. And again, the best possible outcome for the mess that we're in that I can see is a Soviet Union-style collapse, which will be triggered when the economy finally comes crashing down.
Yeah, but Mike, doesn't it take gas and people, and that's for the army to go? All we got to do is shut off the gas. Oh, yeah, that's just it. We do all the work. They exploit us. We're the ones. The minute we shut the power off, they're done, man. That's just
well, a general strike would definitely have an impact. Yeah, a general strike is a good idea. If we could organize a general strike, that would be a very, very powerful message. General strikes worked in India. There's one going on down in Brazil right now. If we could actually get the American people to stop fighting amongst each other, which is being deliberately fanned up by the government, and just say, all right, we're all going to stay home for this week. We're not going to go to work. We're not going to go to school. We're not going to go buy anything. We're just going to stay at home to send a message saying that, government needs us a lot more than we need the government.
Like I said, people need to get this in their head. We outnumber them. We are the power. They can have all the bombs they want. They ain't going to kill all of us. We're going to prevail. But we got to quit being chicken little and crying on these radio shows. Let's see what we can do to help each other and get after it, man. You guys want to wait till it happens, or you want to be ahead of the curve? It's all up to you. But like me, I'm done paying. No more hunting license, no more stuff. If I hunt for food, I'm going to hunt for food. I'm not going to go on the ranges. I'm going to hunt wherever I want and when I want. I'm done with all this stuff. I stopped buying a driver's license 20 years ago. And but I do buy insurance. I have insurance on all my vehicles because I think that's courteous to the public. But other than that, they can kiss my ass as far as I'm concerned. You guys don't stand up. Let's do it.
Okay.
All right, Mike, that's all I got to say.
All right. Well, no, I hear what you're saying. Have you ever seen the YouTube video, The Tiny Dot? Oh, I guess he hung up. All right. Well, I'll make a point of posting that to whatreallyhappened.com because he's right about one thing. There are 300+ million Americans, and there's only a few thousand people in the government. All right. We're going to take another phone call. James in Ohio. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I know that due to the news of late, especially about Trump, a lot of people are disheartened, but we need to keep in mind that by electing him, we beat the biggest political machine in the world. And like Woodrow Wilson said, persistence is the main factor in success. And we just need to keep it up. And I think a good thing to push as far as political activity is this Article 5 Constitutional Convention. And furthermore, just a suggestion, James Corbett on his weekly show, New World next week, occasionally they'll have a segment, Good News next week, maybe. Everybody should have, all the radio shows, the independent media should have a section where they talk about good news because, it's bad news all the time and there are good things that happen.
Well, it's certainly possible, and I try and talk about some of the good things that come on by, because otherwise it can be a little overwhelming. And yes, I count it as a victory that we succeeded in getting the Bush-Clinton duocracy out of power, at least for right now. But people are disappointed because we're still headed toward an economic crash. The government is still rigging the system so that the rich are getting richer and the poor are being replaced by robots. And we are still on this war path that is very, very dangerous. And that is certainly not what Donald Trump campaigned on. And by now we should be used to being lied to by politicians. But again, I think the lesson we take away from the 2016 election is that it doesn't really matter who gets elected into that Oval Office. The real power lies somewhere else, and we need to figure where that is, because that is where they're also most vulnerable.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And we're going to take another phone call from Linda in Massachusetts. Linda, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hi.
I don't think it's the last caller, maybe the caller before, you were talking about marches on Washington. And I just wanted to agree with you and say to him, you know, if people go armed, the way that it's, whether we're all good Americans and nobody has bad intentions, the way it's changed around is that it's infiltrated and somebody that doesn't have good intentions fires a gun.
Absolutely, absolutely. Somebody, you know, sniper up on the roof. Look what they were doing in Kiev. They had snipers on the roof that were shooting in both directions to fan it on up.
Yes.
Remember the Kent State massacre? And it eventually came out that an FBI undercover informant fired a starter pistol to convince the National Guard the students were shooting at them. So, yeah, that's one of the dangers of walking in someplace completely armed. And but if we get
that is the greatest danger, and he really needs to look at those situations that have happened repeatedly around the world and think about that clearly, that is just not the way to go. Your way is the way to go. Gandhi, the pot and pan rebellion like they did in Iceland, anything but armed. And that's all I wanted to add.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and we're going to let you go. At this point, and I'm going to say this one more time, any form of armed resistance is going to play to the government's advantage. We have seen so many presidents who are openly contemptuous of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They'd love to find a way to get rid of it, and dealing with an armed uprising of any kind, any scale, would give them that excuse. If we can get 4 million Americans to walk into Washington, D.C., they don't need to have guns. The message will be loud and clear. But anybody who picks up a gun and starts shooting is actually playing to the government's advantage if they're not actually working for the government undercover. Okay? All right. We're going to take one more call. Brian in Georgia, then the rest of the calls are going to have to wait because I do have some more news to get through. Brian, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just had a little historical tidbit, probably one that went down the memory hole a long time ago, about the Korean War that a lot of people might not know about. But what actually happened when before Truman fired MacArthur, it was Truman that actually ordered MacArthur to push back North Korea after it invaded South Korea. He told MacArthur to invade North Korea, cross the Yalu River. And that was after China had warned 3 times. They said, if you push them back over the Yalu River, China's going to come into this war. And, of course, MacArthur, like a soldier, he did what he was told. He pushed the North Korean troops back over the Yalu River, and China, just as it promised to do, as it warned it was going to do, counterattacked and pushed U.S. troops back across the 38th parallel, and it was a humiliating defeat for the United States. And of course, at that point, Truman, being a politician, he fired MacArthur and said, well, MacArthur acted on his own. I'm firing him now. And, of course, MacArthur never contradicted, what his commander-in-chief did. He just, gave that, old soldiers never die, they just fade away speech. But here again, we had politicians pushing the Chinese, and the Chinese said, don't cross that line, and they did, and, we're living with it today.
Yeah, we are. We're going through the same thing again. Everyone's drawing lines in the sand and say, don't you dare cross this line. Yes, I'm daring to cross. All right, don't you dare cross that line. It is fraught with peril. And as I've mentioned before, right now the future of all humankind is going to be determined by whichever world leader is the least mentally stable. And frankly, with the sole exception of Vladimir Putin, almost every one of them needs to be in a straitjacket right now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, well, listen, thank you very much.
Sorry to say that. I hope they blink for. I hope the U.S. blinks first.
Somebody better blink, or we're all going to be blinded in the nuclear blast. All right, we're going to let you go here, and I want to get some more news here done before we take some more phone calls here. Getting on back to computers, IBM has issued a warning, and apparently it's serious. IBM has announced that some USB sticks, the Storewise flash hybrid storage systems, are infected with malware. And IBM says just destroy the USB sticks immediately, otherwise your device will be infected with malware, making the system vulnerable. And apparently the infected models include drives that have parts number 01A C585 and were shipped with the Storewise V3500, V3700, and V5000 Generation 1 storage systems. And all of those numbers are on the article at whatreallyhappened.com. And we're seeing more and more of this situation where malware is actually being installed on devices somewhere along the supply chain, somewhere at the point of manufacture. And I imagine that a big problem might be in China, where a lot of this stuff is being made, where a cyber criminal goes and he gets a job at the factory that's making this stuff, finds the master file for the software, swaps it for one with the malware, then annoys his boss to get fired, and he's gone. And the company is manufacturing these devices with the malware on it, and they don't know it. And it's not a new problem. Many, many years ago, I worked for an Amiga software company, and they were putting out a game, a space shuttle simulator, called Challenger, which was a very poorly chosen name given events that happened shortly thereafter. But unfortunately, the master disk that was made to go to the duplicators had an Amiga virus on it. And they just skipped formatting the drive. They didn't check the drive. They just assumed it was a blank disk. Nobody even knows how it got in there, infected machine or whatever. And this game went to the duplicators, package, point of sale, and the resulting backlash destroyed the company. So it does happen. Yesterday we were talking about how Facebook is now under fire for writing algorithms to locate and detect emotionally vulnerable kids in order to sell that information to advertisers. These are children who need a boost in confidence. They're going to be susceptible to an advertising pitch for a new jacket or new shoes or something with status associated with it. Facebook is now basically trying to back off of this, saying the data amassed by the algorithms was never used for targeted ads, but merely to help marketers understand how people express themselves on Facebook. Well, I'm sorry, if I'm a marketer and I've got that information and I realize what it means, I'm going to use it to hit those vulnerable potential sales here. Now, Facebook is saying it's a process failure and they're running an investigation to correct the mistake. No, they were spying on people. They're profiling them, looking for those who are going to be susceptible to a mass advertising message, and they're making money off of that. Now then, little article coming out of Investment Watch blog, Social Media Censorship Exposed, How Social Media is Colluding with Government to Shut You Up. And they're talking about how Twitter is now starting to ban people who are speaking out, in this particular case, against the communist Chinese government. And apparently these other nations are saying social media has a responsibility to constrain the discussion in alignment with whatever their particular policies and philosophies are, which is going to get confusing for a company that's doing business in China, India, Russia, the United States, South America, Europe, and so forth. How do you keep everybody happy? Well, the answer is you don't. So, let's talk about human-caused global warming. Heavy wet snow downs power lines in southern Nebraska. Blizzard rocks western Kansas. And apparently it was so bad, travelers actually got stranded by the snow. Let's see. Colby, Kansas reported 17 inches of snow this last weekend. And that's a lot of snow for the doorstep to May, as it were. Another story, huge concern. This is out of CattleNetwork.com. The feed yards, which thought spring were here and they're already putting out the feed to sell to the cattle providers there, they're scrambling to recover. They got hit by a blizzard, and a lot of the feed got blighted and frozen. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're talking about human-caused global warming, or the absence thereof, and in particular this major storm that hit the eastern part of the country over this last weekend. They had snow, western Kansas, eastern Colorado, panhandle of Texas up to Nebraska. And apparently the National Weather Service reported 15 to 18 inches of snow in the hardest hit areas of western Kansas. And as much as 75% of the U.S. cattle on feed were affected by the storm. Power outages included at least 42,000 customers by 2 power cooperatives in western Kansas. Remember back in March of 2000, the banner headline, "Snowfalls are now a thing of the past." Now, up in Morris, Minnesota, they're getting slushy snow, 4 inches, which doesn't sound like a lot until you remember this is May that we're talking about. This is May. Another article here, April showers may bring May snow showers. This is over, apparently the spring snowstorm was a record breaker for the Sioux Empire. The National Weather Service said Sioux Falls set new daily records for snowfall yesterday and today. And, of course, I mentioned this yesterday, but it's worth talking about again today. There was actually a protest march against human-caused global warming over in Denver that had to be canceled when they got hit with the blizzard. And with all of this going on, Al Gore is now asking the world to pay $15 trillion to stop human-caused global warming, because if he doesn't get that $15 trillion, there will be a 2 degrees centigrade rise in temperature in 100 years. Now, here's something a little interesting. If you go back in history to 2 periods known as the Roman warming period and the medieval warming period, these were times in history where the Earth was in fact a lot warmer, and it had nothing to do with human activity and everything to do with solar output. And the warmer worlds were more abundant. There was food growing everywhere, and because of the easy availability of food, civilization had more time to devote to things like art, architecture, engineering, the building of the Roman Empire, the aqueducts, the invention of concrete. The same thing with the medieval warming period gave rise to the Renaissance. People were living lives of luxury because of the warmer world. And that's why all this silliness about human-caused global warming. Climate always changes. It always has. It always will. It's dominated by solar energy output, which does fluctuate over time, and by the Earth's orbit and axis changes. That's it. That's basically what's going on. The human effect on climate is minuscule. But like any politician, Al Gore took something that happens naturally, declared it an imminent emergency, and demanded money and media attention for it. And he got it. So that's what politicians like to do. Oh, Iraq is a threat. Let's get a war going. North Korea is a threat. Let's get a war going. The world is warming. You got to pay a carbon tax. It's just this constant parade of mythical demons and disasters and hobgoblins we're presented with to trick us out of our money and our obedience. And I think it's time that it all came to a screeching halt. The human race needs to learn how to think and not imagine that a belief is the same thing as actually knowing. Because it is those beliefs and those who manufacture and control those beliefs which are holding you all slaves. So we cry freedom, we learn to think analytically, logically, we get the raw data, and we decide for ourselves. You are your own best analyst in terms of what is going on. And you can make up your own mind. And if some people are coming to the wrong conclusion, they are offset by the people who've come to the opposite conclusion. In the end, it averages out a better informed, less easy to control human population. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I'm looking at my email here, and somebody's sending in information. Apparently, Microsoft Outlook Server, which is the code that's on your email provider, apparently 2 months ago started developing problems. I've been seeing the symptoms here as well. I think our entire IT infrastructure has gotten so large and complicated, it's becoming almost impossible to manage. And a lot of it has to do with the constant desire to upgrade and sell more service and sell more product. I remember for one project I worked on many years ago, I had to work with Microsoft Exchange, and what an obfuscated, bloated piece of software that was. And I think it's making it more and more difficult to deal with the problems that are coming on up, such as what's going on with Spectrum. So a lot of people writing on in saying that they've got problems there on Spectrum. And a good resource to use for that is called downdetector.com. And you can go to that page, and they have a whole list of the various internet service providers around the country. And there's even a search function. So you can find and see if your internet service provider is having problems. And again, Spectrum seems to be having major issues all over. And it is a mess. And in a way, it's a lot like the fall of Rome. Because Rome, when it was young and free of debt and not quite as corrupted as it eventually became, they did some amazing things. The building of the roads, the aqueducts, the amazing cities, the invention of concrete. But then as Rome began its decline, they didn't have the resources to maintain it all. And the roads started cracking, the aqueducts started failing. And we're seeing the same thing here in a high-tech equivalent, as it were. Now then, here's an interesting little story. We've been talking about vaccines and vaccine adjuvants, and a lot of people are very concerned about the harm the adjuvants can cause. There is a considerable body of evidence to support the idea that the epidemic of peanut anaphylaxis in our society, which was unheard of just 50 years ago, is linked to the use of peanut oil as a vaccine adjuvant. Now, peanut oil is supposed to be ingested and digested, not injected into your arm. So here's a story. This is actually back in 2009, where Spiegel reported that German Chancellor Angela Merkel and government ministers, their version of the H1N1 vaccine did not have the adjuvants. The vaccine that was foisted onto the general public did. The public did not have the option of an adjuvant-free version of the vaccine. And obviously, they feel that the adjuvants aren't needed, or they wouldn't have given an adjuvant-free vaccine to Angela Merkel. We're going to take a couple of phone calls here. Ramsey in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello?
You're on the air.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm fine.
See, sir, I just want to make a point. People on the show said that people should be walking around like Mahatma Gandhi and so on. But see, sir, the thing is, according to my record and my analysis, the British didn't. The British didn't withdraw because of Gandhi. They withdrew because they were their empire was done. They were economically and militarily exhausted because of World War II.
Well, that was a big part of it, but the general strikes and the refusal by the people of India to buy the British imported products made India basically not profitable at all. The whole reason for British colonialism was to take over a country and then force its people to buy British products and use the British pound sterling loaned at interest, the exact same thing they did to the United States. And when the people of India just decided they didn't need the fancy clothes from Great Britain, then sales plummeted, and maintaining the British control over India was losing money, and at that point they were ready to leave.
And here's another thing: people should be thinking about. People should be protesting in the thousands and so on towards the people that support the government, like the banks and the corporations. Like it's like what that guy did. That actor, what's his name, who made the 9/11 movie.
I'm sorry, which movie?
He made the movie on Capitalism 101.
I know who you're talking about. I can't remember the name either. Yeah.
It's the guy from Michigan. He talks about he's like an overweight kind of guy with the glasses.
You mean no? That's not Michael Moore.
Yeah, Michael Moore, right? Isn't it him?
I'll have to double check on that. Okay.
You see, sir, he made like an event protesting against Wall Street or the banks. So I think people should be considering doing that again, like to get the message out.
Okay. Capitalism 101 as a book was written by Leon Weinstein, and I'm not seeing Michael Moore associated with the video of it, but it could be possible. I'm not up to date on that.
No, see, sir, I got the title wrong, but see, it was Capitalism something.
Okay, well, I'll take a look at that, okay, during the next commercial break. Ramsey, we're going to let you go and switch over to James in Texas. James, aloha. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Yes, I wanted to give you and your viewers a little bit of early 2000 history, 2002 exactly. Remember when we were about to go into Iraq? And you know the reason why they had remember that whole sloganeering of Freedom Prize?
Yeah, France didn't want to go along with the coalition into Iraq, and so they were trying to basically shame France into going along with it, calling them cheese-eating surrender monkeys, and we're not going to have French fries in this country, they're freedom fries. It was really kind of a ridiculous thing, but yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, they didn't want to go along with the genocide that was about to happen, right?
Well, they didn't want to lose their own people in what was essentially a war to prop up the use of the U.S. dollar as the global oil currency. They didn't really see that there was much advantage to them personally doing that.
Yeah, who would anyways, right? You know, I wouldn't want to lose my life over it. But you know who were the running mates during that election?
No,
you know
I don't.
One of them was?
I don't recall. Which election are we talking about?
Everybody knows the daughter.
Which election are we talking about?
There was the French election in 2002.
Okay, I don't remember who the candidates were.
Well, everybody knows the daughter's name.
Okay, tell us.
Well, it was Marie Le Pen's father.
Oh,
Him
okay.
And another candidate. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, this is also turning to Mali since it's about French, and France is over there. You know that, right? Their reason is for terrorism. Well,
terrorism is a public face for many of these wars. They're out there fighting terrorism.
Exactly.
But that's not the real reason. That's not the real reason. All wars are ultimately about territory and control and economics.
I know it's their reason that they point to the public. That's why they're so afraid of terrorism now. But the reason is, I think you reported it too, because they had some uranium facilities over there, owned by some very big French corporations. So
you're talking about You're talking about Iraq?
No, I'm talking about Mali in France. They had some big uranium corporations in the northern parts of Mali.
Okay.
And they used the French army because I guess when Boko Haram, they used those couple of thousand of troops that they say they were going to like massacre a city of millions. And that's when they deployed the French troops. But the French troops really went in there to really secure those uranium facilities.
Okay. Now I'm remembering the period of time you're talking about. That was also a cover story because France went into Mali right after Germany asked for the repatriation of its gold from the New York Federal Reserve and the Bank of France. And neither the New York Fed or the Bank of France actually had it. They both put on the big stall. France said it'll take us at least 5 years to get you your gold back. The New York Fed said it would be 8 years. And then France invades Mali, which happens to be Africa's third largest gold producer. And up until the French invasion, Mali had been selling most of that gold to China. And now, of course, France had a source of gold with which to replace the Germany's bullion that they'd been playing fast and loose with.
You know, speaking on that gold topic, did you know during Bill Clinton's time, with one of the, I think it was the Prime Minister near Israel, they made a deal with North Korea, the father of the leader today, about some gold mines.
In North Korea.
North Korea.
Yeah, there are gold mines in North Korea.
Yeah, and I guess they signed them over to Israel or something like that. Or the deal didn't go through. That's right, the deal didn't go through because the North Koreans were skeptical. And now, all of a sudden,
I could understand that.
That's it.
I could understand. Yeah, it could be Israel wanting to recapture the gold mine. Right now, certainly, the New York Fed, J.P. Morgan, the Bank of England, the Bank of France, they are very desperate to get their hands on real physical gold to make good on all of the bullion that was supposed to be stored in their various vaults for safekeeping, and instead it was being leased out the back and rehypothecated, whatever fancy word they want to use on it, and they're trying to get it on back. Certainly when they invaded Libya, the gold for the gold dinar disappeared, and nobody knows where that went. Anyway, James, we're going to let you go. We're running.
I got one more point.
Okay, make it quick. Make it quick.
Because it's all about the economy. Once we go to, did you know South Korea is coinless now? Coin is what is money. The metal that's in the coin is the money. That's the store of value. They get rid of the coin and they make the perversion of money become paper and everything. What we have as Americans today is our coinage. We're still able to get it. We're still able to get the pennies that are copper. The nickels have been the same since 1855.
Well, you're off there. You're off there because America's current coinage does not have much intrinsic value. The silver was taken out of the quarters and the dimes back in 1964. The penny isn't even solid copper anymore. It's an aluminum alloy. The reason the nickel is still nickel is because nickel is so inexpensive. But it's make-believe money.
But not in Venezuela.
Okay. Well, I understand that.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Well, James, we're going to let you go. Okay. You said you wanted to make one point, and you just seem to want to keep on talking, and I got to get back to some things. Now, referring to the earlier phone call from Ramsey, Michael Moore did make a film called Capitalism, A Love Story. Not Capitalism 101. That's why I was so confused, and I said Michael Moore didn't make Capitalism 101. There is another film out there called Capitalism 101, but it's not by Michael Moore. So, folks, try and have your hands around the actual facts before you call on in and waste everybody's time. All right, moving on here. We've been talking about sky-high medical costs in this country. We've got the most expensive medical care in the world, and it's something like 36th in quality. We were talking earlier about how medical care has become bubbled up with all of price inflation and investment in Obamacare, and could actually see a major stumble. And this is not going to help. The FDA has just approved a new drug, Brineura, for a rare childhood brain disease known as CLN2, which can progress very quickly and is considered fatal. BioMarin, the drug's manufacturer, has set the yearly price of the drug at $702,000. But if you're not wealthy, they will give you a discount down to $486,000 a year. And that really is, I think, exploiting the situation extensively. Now, story coming out of Great Britain, it's being reported on Natural News. There's an organic certifier over there, the certification agency Soil Association, and it's come on out with a report warning people that beauty products in Great Britain that are labeled organic are misleading. Now, both in Great Britain and here in the United States of America, cosmetics are considered exempt from various government tests because they're, after all, worn externally. Well, that in itself is a little misleading, because anything you put on your skin will be absorbed into the body. I remember when I was in college and I took a physiology course, one of the first experiments they did was to rub garlic on the sole of your feet and time how long it took before you tasted it on your tongue. And it shows you how porous the body really can be. DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide, is another good example. It is very effective at penetrating the skin and taking chemicals inside the body. And so this idea that you shouldn't be testing cosmetics because they're external only, that really is not on the up and up. And now we're finding out that beauty products in Great Britain labeled organic may not be. And they may, in fact, contain banned ingredients. Now, for those of you who've been following our show for a long time, you know that we went through an incident with the lovely lady Claire, where she was suffering extreme joint pain. And she went the orthodox medical route, doctor after doctor, pills, special shoes, all the rest of the stuff, including some medications prescribed to her off-label. And we finally found out what was causing the joint pain were a class of chemicals called formaldehyde precursors in low-end household and cosmetic products. And formaldehyde is a known carcinogen, but it stops spoilage, stops loss, increases profits, and that's why it's sold in this country. Now, they have passed a law banning formaldehyde-based glues being used on children's shoes, but they can still be used on adult shoes and other leather goods like handbags. So it's really out there. And our medical establishment is literally brainwashed to sell the next product, sell the next item, and they don't even look at this possibility that maybe you can be cured and made well by taking something out rather than putting something more in. We're going to take a break for commercials, back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Last segment of our program today. And still getting emails from other parts of the country regarding Spectrum. In fact, people are starting to say, this is an actual internet outage. That's how bad it is. So I'm looking at a story out of Fox Business where there's this Silicon Valley high-tech, food tech startup which has a process for what is called lab-grown meat, where they will take some cells from a food animal like beef or chicken, put it in nutrients and just let it sort of grow and multiply and grow and multiply, and they're going to make food items out of it. And I have two concerns with that. Is it really going to be economically viable compared to traditional farming? And two, what chemicals are they putting in there to get the cells to behave the way they want them to? And so, to be very honest, I'm not feeling like it's something I'm going to want to put into my mouth. But apparently they're saying the whole process takes about 4 to 6 weeks from cells to finished harvestable chunk of a sort of meat-like substance. And I don't know, what are they going to do? Start outlawing chickens and cattle? And you will get your lab-produced food. It's Soylent Moo. It's a little bit weird there. A little bit of a technical breakthrough. This is being reported at Digital Trends. Somebody has developed the world's highest speed movie camera that shoots at 5 trillion frames per second, which is going to be a very powerful research tool for events that happen extremely rapidly, or it could be a lot of tedium going through all that footage to find the event. But I find that kind of footage interesting. I remember as a kid in school where they were showing us a bullet going through a balloon shot at ultra high speed, and the balloon would just sort of peel away. Oh my goodness, it's a bullet. Picture of a bullet shouldn't be in our school. If you are following seismic events, there is a quake swarm in British Columbia, way up north near the Alaska border, and I've been watching it for the last couple of days. So far, they've had over 400 earthquakes. They're small ones, but it's looking like we could be on the verge of something really, really big up there. Fortunately, it is not heavily populated, but we're seeing the whole world starting to rock and roll around the planet, or maybe it's Earth just saying, "Get off me." Okay. Apparently, United Airlines CEO is now acknowledging that dragging that passenger off was an epic mistake, and now there are more difficulties for the airline industry. Apparently, flight attendants are claiming that the air circulating on planes can be toxic and cause seizures, nausea, and breathing difficulties. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. There is still a chance we can derail this rush to World War III, and I need your help to do it. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.